The white sedan had been behind me for over 100 miles, and it never once touched its brakes. My name is Cal. I've been driving long haul for 11 years, mostly out of a depot in Salt Lake City. That particular run was dry freight headed to Reno, standard overnight, nothing special. I left the yard around 9 in the evening on a Wednesday in late October. The route took me west on Interstate 80 through the Nevada high desert, which is exactly as empty as it sounds after dark. No towns, no lights on the horizon, just the interstate cutting through the black. I was in a 2019 Peterbilt 579, one of the newer ones from our fleet. Light load, smooth run, coffee in the cup holder, a country station fading in and out of static. I'd done this run maybe 30 times. I knew where every rest stop was, every exit, every dark mile between me and Winnemucca. I wasn't thinking about anything except staying awake. That's when I noticed the headlights. They came up behind me around mile marker 212 east of Elko, two headlights low to the ground and closed together. A car, not a truck, running fast at first, then settling in about 4 car lengths back. I clocked it and didn't think much of it. People drive at night. People tuck in behind semis because they feel safer back there. But those lights stayed put for a long time. I watched them in the driver's mirror. I sped up a little just to test. The lights sped up too. I eased back down to 67. The lights eased back. I told myself it was nothing. Someone on autopilot running the same speed, not paying attention. Then I hit a long stretch with 4 exits in about 12 miles. Ranch roads, Bureau of Land Management turnoffs, unmarked gravel, the kind that go nowhere. I watched the mirror. The car took none of them. I switched on the CB. Channel 19 was quiet, normal for that stretch late at night. I keyed up anyway and asked if anyone was eastbound on I-80 near Elko. Nothing for a minute. Then a trucker running east said he'd passed me about 20 miles back, asked if everything was all right. I said I had a car sitting tight on my back bumper for a while. He went quiet for a second, then he said, "Keep driving, don't stop." I asked him what he meant. He said, "There's been a couple reports tonight, just keep driving." He clicked off. I tried to raise him again, nothing. My stomach dropped, but I kept it rational. Reports could mean anything. A drunk driver, some road rage incident 40 miles east, nothing necessarily about me. I started paying closer attention. The country station had given up by then, dropped into pure static. I clicked it off. The only sounds were the engine and the road, and in the mirror those 2 lights. The sedan was white, 4-door, I thought, based on the shape I caught when a distant overpass light swept across it. No front plate visible, running with regular headlights, nothing weird about the lights themselves. What was weird was the consistency. It never dropped back, it never closed the gap. It just held there 4 lengths behind me, like it was bolted to the road. I passed the pilot station at Battle Mountain. I had enough fuel to skip it, but I thought about pulling in anyway. I slowed down and put my right blinker on. The white sedan slowed too. I held the blinker for a few seconds. The sedan matched my speed, still behind me, still 4 lengths back. I canceled the turn and kept going. The sedan sped back up without hesitating. I went cold, not a chill, something deeper, the kind that starts in your chest and moves out into your hands and jaw, because that was a decision. That wasn't a drowsy driver on autopilot. Whatever was in that car watched me signal and adjusted. I became very aware of how far I was from anything. The nearest exit behind me was 11 miles back. The desert on both sides was absolute dark, not a fence post, not a ranch light, nothing. Out there, I-80 runs straight and flat for long enough that you can see headlights 4 or 5 miles out in either direction. There was nothing coming east, nothing ahead of me going west, just the white sedan and me, and about 90 miles of dark between Battle Mountain and the Loves in Winnemucca. I got back on the CB, asked if anyone was westbound between Battle Mountain and Winnemucca. A woman's voice came on, another trucker running east. She said she was about 30 miles ahead of me. I told her what I was seeing. She said she'd watch for a white sedan coming through. She came back 3 minutes later. "Nothing," she said, "nothing's past me going west." I looked at my mirror, still there. There's a rest area about 18 miles west of Battle Mountain. State run, usually a few overnight sleepers parked there. I started thinking about it, public place, other people. But I also thought about pulling in and having that white sedan pull in right behind me. I decided to slow down as I passed the entrance, just to see what was there. There was a car already parked in the dark end of the lot, white, 4-door, no lights on. I don't have an explanation for it. The car had been behind me in my mirror for 40 minutes, and somehow there was already one waiting there. My brain tried to make it work, a different car, a coincidence, some fleet vehicle sitting there for days. But it was the same make, the same flat white, the kind that looks gray under sodium lights, and it was parked with the nose pointed at the exit ramp, pointed out. The sedan behind me didn't slow as we passed, it held its position. I kept my eyes on that parked car for as long as the mirror angle allowed, maybe 4 or 5 seconds as I rolled past. No interior light, no movement. I couldn't tell if anyone was sitting inside, and that absence of information was its own kind of answer. A car parked empty at a rest area at 1 in the morning has a particular stillness to it. This one didn't feel still, it felt ready. That was the moment I knew it was personal. Not random, not a drunk, something coordinated, more than one vehicle or the same vehicle somehow ahead of me and behind me at the same time. I didn't understand the mechanics of it, I still don't. What I understood in that moment was that someone knew my route, someone knew exactly where I was going to be. I called my dispatcher, his name is Todd and he picks up at all hours, that's the job. I told him everything, the car, the rest area, the CB report, I kept my voice level. Todd went quiet for a second, then said, "Don't stop anywhere small. Get to the Loves in Winnemucca. I'm calling the highway patrol right now." I put the hammer down, up to 75, then 78. The white sedan came up too. It closed the gap to maybe 2 car lengths and held there. I watched it in the mirror and I thought about what Todd had said. Lights, people, a parking lot full of trucks. 40 miles to go. Those were the longest 40 miles I've driven in 11 years. My hands were tight on the wheel. I made myself loosen them every few minutes because tense hands make you sloppy. The heater was on, but that cold hadn't left. I was running on coffee and adrenaline and the specific focus that comes when your body has decided something is serious before your brain has fully caught up. Every time the road curved and the sedan's headlights swept a different angle in my mirror, I half expected them to be gone. Every time they were still there, 2 lights 4 lengths back, patient as anything. I kept the CB on channel 19 and put out my location every few minutes. A trucker named Darnell said he was westbound and would watch for me. Another guy said he was already at the Loves and would stay visible when I came in. I took the Winnemucca exit at 2:17 in the morning. The white sedan followed me down the ramp. I pulled into the Loves lot and drove straight to the fuel islands, lit up like a stadium. I laid on the horn twice, 2 long blasts. There were 4 or 5 truckers standing by their rigs and they all turned to look. I threw it in park and climbed down while the engine was still running. The white sedan had stopped at the edge of the lot, near the street. It sat there for maybe 30 seconds. Then it turned around and left. A Nevada Highway Patrol trooper showed up about 12 minutes later. He'd gotten Todd's call. I told him everything. He wrote it down carefully, asked for the best description I had of the car. He didn't seem surprised. I asked him about that directly. He said there had been 2 other reports that month on that same stretch of Interstate 80, one from a rideshare driver, one from a woman in an SUV. Both described a white sedan following them for extended distances at night. No plates recovered, no stops that went anywhere. He said they didn't know yet whether it was one person or more than one. He said I'd done everything right. I asked him about the car at the rest area, the one that was already parked there. He got quiet for a second. He said the rest area had a camera on the entrance. He'd request the footage. I never heard back about what was on it. I slept 4 hours in the Peterbilt with all the doors locked and the lot lights on. Finished the run to Reno the next morning in daylight, which felt like a different planet. That was 14 months ago. I still run I-80. It's my route and it's my living. But I don't run the Battle Mountain stretch alone anymore if I can help it. I coordinate with other drivers going the same direction. I stay on the CB. I don't skip the busy fuel stops. The high desert is quiet out there. It doesn't care who's on the road with you. And at 2 in the morning, neither does anyone else. On the second morning, the voice that called my dad's name was my dad's voice, and my dad was sitting right next to me. My name is Cal, I'm 31 now. I've been hunting since I was 12, mostly whitetail, mostly in the same stretch of ridge country in western Pennsylvania that my father's family has worked for 3 generations. We go every November. We park the same truck at the same 2-track off Route 6, climb the same stands we've been climbing since before I was born. It's not complicated, it's just what we do. This was the November I was 26. My dad, Ray, had turned 60 that summer. We drove up from Harrisburg on a Friday night in his old GMC Sierra, stopped at a Sheetz outside Mansfield for coffee and gas, and pulled into camp just past midnight. Uncle Dennis had already set up the cook tent, 3 cots, a propane heater, a card table, same as always. Dad had his 30-06, the Remington 700 he's owned since the 80s. I was running my compound that year, a Matthews Verdicts I'd saved up most of the spring to buy. The plan was simple. Dad and I would take the 2 Oak Ridge stands on the east end of the property. Dennis would work the creek bottom. The first morning was quiet, cold, maybe 28 degrees. I saw a doe at a distance and let her walk. Dad saw nothing. We came back to camp, played cards, napped, normal. The second morning is the one I'm telling you about. We were up at 4:15. Dad and I walked the ridge trail together in the dark with headlamps splitting off at the old beech tree where the trail forks. His stand was maybe 300 yards north of mine. I climbed up, knocked an arrow, got settled. 5:15, black sky, no moon. The temperature had dropped overnight. My breath came out in short white puffs. I could feel the metal of the stand biting through my gloves where I gripped the rail. There was no wind at all. That sounds like a good thing for hunting, but it isn't always. When the air is completely still, the woods carry sound from farther away than you expect. Every small thing is louder than it should be. A squirrel moving through dry leaves 60 yards off sounds like it's right underneath you. I noticed that. I noticed how quiet it was. Around 6, I heard movement below the stand, too heavy for a squirrel, too deliberate for deer, footsteps in the leaves. They came close, slowed, and stopped about 20 feet south of my tree. I looked down, dark shapes in tree trunks. The headlamp was off. I figured it was Dad. Sometimes he'd slip over if he got cold and wanted company. But then I heard him right there beside me in the stand. He was shifting his weight, the aluminum creaking the way it always did. He was in the stand with me. Then the voice came from below, from the ground, from the dark, right where those footsteps had stopped. It said his name. Ray. Just that one word. In his voice. I went completely still. Dad looked at me and I looked at him. He'd heard it too. The color left his face. I think the color left mine. Neither of us spoke for probably 15 seconds. Then Dad leaned over and put his mouth right against my ear. He said, barely a whisper, "Don't move." I didn't. Here's what makes me certain I wasn't confused. I've listened to my father's voice my entire life. The way he says his own name, there's a particular way he clips the A and drops the end. A slight flatness to it, mid-Atlantic, the way people talk when they've spent their whole lives between the mountains and the city. The voice from below the stand did all of it, every detail exactly right. It was not similar, it was not close. It was his voice coming from a place he wasn't. What unsettled me almost as much as the voice was what came right after it. Silence. Not the ordinary silence of the woods settling back down, something more deliberate. Whatever had spoken didn't move away. No retreating footsteps, no shift of weight in the leaves. It just stopped, like it was listening for a response, like it was waiting to find out if the call had worked. I counted my own pulse for a while. That was all I had to do. We sat in that stand for another full hour. About 20 minutes after the voice, something walked the tree line at the edge of the clearing. I say walked because that's the motion, upright, slow, moving from south to north across my field of view, maybe 40 yards out. It didn't stop, it didn't look up, it just crossed and went into the trees on the far side. There was just enough gray pre-dawn light to make out a shape, but not detail. Tall, narrow in a way that didn't look right. The gait was unhurried, almost casual, the way something moves when it knows it isn't being chased. There was no sound, no footsteps. At 40 yards on a frozen forest floor, I should have heard something. I heard nothing. That bothered me more than the shape did. It bothers me now more than it did then. I had an arrow nocked the whole time. I never once thought about drawing. Dad saw it too. He didn't raise his rifle. There are moments where the instinct that keeps you alive is smarter than you are. That was one of them. We climbed down around 7:30 when the light was full and the woods were loud with birds. We didn't talk until we were off the ridge. We walked back at a normal pace, not hurrying. That sounds strange, but it made sense in the moment. Running felt wrong. Running felt like we'd be making a decision about what that thing was, and neither of us was ready to do that. At the fork by the beech tree, I stopped and looked at the ground, boot prints in the frost. Mine going out, Dad's going out. A third set coming up from the south, cutting in near the base of my tree, then turning north along the ridge toward Dad's stand. The prints were big, longer than mine, and I wear a 12. No tread pattern I recognized, just smooth-soled like an old boot with the tread worn flat. I crouched and looked at them for a long time. The frost around the edges hadn't fully melted back yet. They weren't old, they were from that morning. Something had made them while the temperature was still down, while Dad and I were still in the stand above. Dad crouched beside me. He looked at the prints. Then he stood up and kept walking. He didn't say a word. Back at camp, Dennis had a doe in the back of his Silverado and was in a good mood. We didn't say much. I made coffee. Dad sat outside in a camp chair and stared at the tree line until I brought him a cup. He wrapped both hands around it and kept staring. I stood next to him for a while. The sky had gone full gray, low clouds coming in from the northwest. The forecast said rain by afternoon. I remember thinking the rain would wash the prints out. I was oddly relieved by that. That night after Dennis turned in, I told Dad I wanted to go back out in the morning. He shook his head, not arguing, not explaining, just no. I asked him if he'd ever had anything like that happen before. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Your grandfather stopped hunting the East Ridge in 1987. Never said exactly why." I asked if Grandpa ever told him. Dad said he said something followed him out of the woods, used his partner's voice. He thought it was trying to get him to call back. I sat with that. Then Dad said, "He told me once that you can't let it know you heard it." I thought about that hour we'd spent in the stand, not moving, not making a sound. Maybe we'd done the right thing without knowing to. On Sunday morning before we left, I drove out to the ranger station on Route 6 to pick up our kill tags. The game warden there was an older guy. He'd worked that district for over 20 years. I didn't plan to say anything, but while he was filling out the paperwork, I mentioned we'd had some strange activity near the East Ridge. I kept it vague. I said something was moving on two legs in the dark, using human sounds. He stopped writing. He asked me exactly where on the ridge. I told him the two-track, the stand locations. He wrote the information down on a separate notepad, not on any official form. Then he said, "You hear it call a specific name." I said yes. He nodded once and handed me the tags. He didn't ask anything else. I asked if he knew what it was. He said, "I know to stay off that ridge after dark." That was the end of the conversation. On the drive home, Dad and I stopped at the same Sheets outside Mansfield, got the same coffee. Neither of us talked about it. We just sat there in the parking lot for a while, listening to the Sierra idle, watching the interstate lights. I've thought about that voice more times than I can count, the way it had his cadence exactly right, the way it came from below, from the dark, from right where those footprints led. I don't know what was in those woods. I've stopped trying to name it. What I know is that it was patient. It waited a full morning. It watched us climb in, figured out the right name, figured out the right voice, and then it called. Whatever it was hoping would happen next, we didn't give it the chance. We still go out every November. Same Sierra, same Route 6, same camp. We just don't hunt the East Ridge anymore. On the second night, something walked a slow circle around my tent. I want to tell you about that trip. I'm telling you because I still can't explain it, and I'm tired of carrying it alone. My name is Drew. I've been hiking since I was 14. I did the long trail solo when I was 22. I know what deer sound like in brush. I know what a black bear does when it catches your scent. I know the difference between wind in a hemlock stand and wind in hardwoods. I am not someone who spooks easily in the woods. This was 4 years ago, early October. A stretch of the Allegheny National Forest in northwestern Pennsylvania up near the Tonesta Creek drainage. The trail doesn't see much traffic that time of year. Rifle season doesn't open until November, so the hunters weren't out yet. I'd planned the trip for months, 5 nights solo, no itinerary, just a topo map and a pack. I left my Tacoma at the Morrison Run trailhead off Forest Route 119 on a Tuesday morning, signed in at the register. I was the only entry for the previous 3 days. The first day was perfect, cold and clear, leaves down on the trail, that wet oak smell you only get in October, something earthy underneath, almost fungal. I made camp by a small tributary around mile 9, slept well, no issues. The second morning I found a boot print. It was in the soft mud right at the edge of the creek, maybe 20 feet from where I'd filtered water the evening before. Deep tread, a large boot, bigger than mine, pointing directly toward my tent. I stood there looking at it for a while. It didn't alarm me right away. Someone else on the trail was a normal thing, but I'd been the only entry in that register for 3 days, and when I looked around, there was only the one print. No approach track, no departure track, just the one boot coming up out of the mud and then nothing. I packed up and kept walking. Around midday, I crossed paths with 2 guys coming the opposite direction. Orange vests, scouting ahead of rifle season. We talked for a few minutes. I mentioned the print. One of them shook his head and said they hadn't seen a soul in 2 days. I thanked them and moved on. That afternoon, I started hearing the whistle. It wasn't a bird. I'm from Pennsylvania. I know the birds. This was 3 short notes, even pitch, even spacing, like a signal call. I heard it twice in 1 hour, both times from the ridge above me and to my left. The second time I stopped and looked up the slope for a long time. Open hardwoods up there, beech and maple, gray trunks close together. I could see maybe 80 yards before the terrain folded away. Nothing moved, no shape, no color that didn't belong. I saw nothing. I set up camp near a big flat rock, maybe mile 17, made a fire, ate, listened. The forest was quiet in a way I didn't love, not peaceful quiet, absent quiet, no owls, no mice in the leaf litter, just the fire and my own breathing. The temperature had dropped fast after dark. I could see my breath catch in the firelight. The burning wood felt too loud, like it was the only sound for a long distance in every direction. The hemlocks along the slope behind me were perfectly still. There was no wind, none. I was in the tent by 9, and around 10:30 the footsteps started. Not a circle right away. First, just the sound of something moving through the leaves off to my left, heavy, deliberate. It stopped. Then it moved again, a little further around, then stopped again. I lay still and listened. The steps were not fast. Each one landed with the particular crunch of dry leaves compressing under real weight, not the skitter of something small, not the random browsing movement of a deer. These were evenly spaced, purposeful. There was a pause between each cluster of steps that felt considered, like something stopping to look before choosing to move again. It completed a half circle and stopped behind the tent. I held my breath. A minute passed, then it moved again, slowly, coming back around to the front. I unzipped my sleeping bag and put my hand on the kabar I keep inside with me. I didn't unzip the tent, I just lay there and tracked the sound. The nylon was inches from my face and I was staring at it like I could see through it. The cold had gotten in despite my bag, that biting cold that finds your nose and the backs of your hands. I didn't move, I barely blinked. It stopped at the front of the tent, right outside the door. I could hear breathing, slow and low, not a sniff the way a bear does. A bear investigates with short, sharp inhalations, curious and anxious. This was different, just slow, even breathing, in and out, patient, like whatever was there had no particular urgency and was prepared to stand in that spot for as long as it wanted. Then it walked away into the trees and the sound faded. I didn't sleep. In the morning I found no prints around the tent. The ground was leaf-covered and dry. Whatever it was left nothing behind. I considered hiking out. I thought about it for maybe 20 minutes while I made coffee, but it was daylight. The woods looked like October woods, and I could not make myself believe something real had been standing outside my tent the night before. So I kept going. The third day was when it got worse. I'd stop to check my map and hear footsteps stop behind me. I'd start walking and hear them start again, not right behind me. Maybe 100 yards upslope, paralleling me through the trees, even pace, matching mine. I spun around twice and saw nothing. At one point I stopped completely and stood in the trail for almost 10 minutes. The sound stopped when I stopped. I started walking. It started. I tried jogging for 30 seconds. The sound kept pace. Same distance upslope, staying with me. That went on for most of the afternoon. I remember watching my shadow lengthen on the trail and thinking I needed to find a campsite before dark, and that whatever was up on that slope would know when I stopped moving for good. That thought sat in my chest for the rest of the daylight hours and wouldn't leave. That night I built my fire bigger than I needed to and kept it going late. I sat outside the tent until almost midnight. The cold was hard by then, probably mid-20s. I kept feeding wood into the fire and watching the tree line and telling myself I was being irrational. At about 11:40, I heard my name. Just once from the tree line across the clearing. I sat completely still. It wasn't loud, it was conversational, like someone standing 15 feet away who expected me to hear them fine. A male voice. It said my name, said Drew, in the same tone you'd use to get someone's attention across a room. Not a whisper, not a shout, just a word spoken at a normal register in a dark forest at midnight, delivered with the casual confidence of someone who already knew exactly where I was and had known for some time. No one knew I was there. My trip plan was filed with my roommate back in Pittsburgh, but he wasn't the outdoors type. There was no one within 20 miles who should have known my name. I grabbed the kabar and the headlamp, put them both in my hands, turned the lamp on and aimed it at the tree line. Nothing. But I heard it move. Whatever was there stepped back into the trees, not panicked, not running, just a few slow steps backward into the dark, the leaves compressed and released under each one. It moved the same way it had moved around my tent the night before, without hurry, without alarm, like my headlamp was a mild inconvenience and nothing more. Then silence. That was the moment I stopped trying to explain it. Not an animal, animals don't say your name, and not a person doing something innocent. No innocent person stands at the edge of a remote campsite in an empty stretch of the Allegheny at midnight and says the name of the solo hiker inside the tent. No innocent person spends 2 days following someone through the trees and then circles their tent in the dark, breathing slowly at the door, and comes back the next night with a single word. There is no version of that which is innocent. That was the moment I knew. I broke camp in the dark. 2 in the morning, headlamp on, pack strapped as tight as it would go. I didn't filter water, I didn't eat, I just hiked. 8 miles back to the Morrison Run trailhead, most of it by headlamp. I watched the edges of the light the whole way. Every time the trail curved, I told myself not to run. I did not run, but I wanted to. I was at the truck by 6:15. I threw my pack in the bed, got in, locked the doors, and sat there shaking before I could start the engine. I drove straight through to the Flying J on Interstate 80 near Clarion, sat in the lot, drank bad coffee, watched the sun come up fully before I felt okay enough to get back on the highway. I never told anyone what the voice said, I just said the trip got cut short. The following spring I contacted the district ranger office for the Allegheny. I didn't tell them everything. I just asked if there'd been any incidents in that drainage, missing persons, anything unusual. The woman I spoke to paused for just a moment before she said they didn't discuss open investigations. I didn't ask a follow-up question. About 8 months after that, I found a thread on a hiking forum. Teonesta Drainage, a guide describing a solo October trip 2 years before mine. He wrote about footsteps circling his tent. He wrote about something following him upslope through the trees. He stopped the post before he got to the worst part, just said he hiked out early and never went back. I created an account to reply to him. I typed out what happened to me. I got as far as the voice saying my name. Then I deleted it and closed the tab. Some things you can't put into words without it becoming too real again. I still hike, I still go into remote country, but I don't go into that part of the Allegheny anymore, and I never go solo in October. If you're heading into that drainage off Forest Route 119, pay attention to when the forest goes quiet, not peaceful quiet, the other kind.